Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan, and today we are going to be taking a look at the newest wave of Masters of the Universe, Masterverse figures, which, man, personally, I really feel like Masterverse has stepped it up. I've been a big fan of what they've been doing recently, especially with the new Eternia figures. But this particular wave gives us 4 brand new figures, 2 of which are from that new Eternia line, giving us Manat Arms and Trapjaw, and the other 2 being based on the upcoming Revolution animated series, giving us Skeletor, or as the box just says Skeletor, but all of the sales information called him Skeletor, and Sorceress Tila. And one of the things I definitely want to start with is this packaging, because this is the first wave to give us brand new packaging for Masterverse. And one of the biggest changes here is that the artwork is now front and center. Now, this line has always had some really great artwork, but it was always relegated to the spine and the back of the box. This new packaging brings that artwork to the forefront to make it a little more prominent, which I personally think is amazing because, as I've said a billion times before, the artwork on the packaging is so important to Masters of the Universe. It's gone hand in hand since the beginning of this toy line. Now, because of the artwork being on the front, that actually does shrink the window down. Originally, these boxes were a full window box with this blue motif, but now we've got a smaller window, though it still shows most of the action figure on the inside. The only thing we can't see is the feet and maybe any other accessories that are packed in aside from the main accessory. Personally, I think this is fine. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of that, but I love this artwork that is wrapped around the figure. You'll also notice that the Masterverse logo at the top has sort of a modern take on the red bursting rocks of the vintage He-Man card backs, and the bottom portion will tell you what subset these figures go to. So, for example, New Eternia is listed under Manat Arms and Trapjaw, while Revolution is listed under Skeletor and Sorceress Tila. Now, the artwork on here is absolutely gorgeous, and one thing that is really cool is if you rotate these around to the spines, you can see that that artwork still continues. Now, when they revealed this packaging back at San Diego Comic-Con, one of the things they talked about was that they did have mint and box collectors in mind here as well. For those that like to line these up on their shelves so you can see the artwork, this perfectly demonstrates what each of these boxes contains with gorgeous artwork. I love that we get a full body shot and a head shot above each of those. Also, it's really cool how on the new Eternia ones, it's like the alternate heads. I think that is really cool. But the other thing that's really neat about these box designs is you'll notice that they've got an angle jutting inward with the figure's name on there. That way, if you do have these lined up on the shelves, you'll still be able to see those names because of the angled box. I think that's pretty creative. Now, the back of the packaging now contains just photography of the product itself, so product shots as well as the cross-sell, and we'll still give you a little blurb about the character down below that. But really awesome boxes, which features some incredible artwork. I mean, look at these designs wrapping around. Look at this on the side of Trapjaws. You can see He-Man doing battle with Triclops. In the jaw bridge of Castle Grayskull, you can see the Talon Fighter flying up here. You got Sky Sleds. I mean, it is absolutely beautiful stuff. So enough about the packaging. I do love it, but we need to open up all 4 of these new figures and take a look at them individually. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, let's go ahead and kick things off with Sorceress Tila here. Bringing in the tape measure, you can see that the figure stands just shy of 7 inches tall, which is about the scale for this particular toy line. Most of the figures are around that 7-inch mark. So this is for the upcoming Revolution series, which of course is the sequel to Revelation. By this point, I guess that's heavy spoilers that the Teela did indeed become the Sorceress of Castle Grayskull at the end of that series. So this is her totally decked out in her Sorceress of Grayskull attire. I really actually love the look of this. I think the sculpt work is pretty top-notch. Let's start with the face there. It's a very, very stern look on her face, but I think that paint deco is pretty good on there. You can see the red hair flowing off of the back there. She's got this sort of tiara that she's wearing, which is really neat because it kind of looks like her old Teela tiara that she would wear, but now it's got this sorceress like falcon type look to it there, like the Zoar look to it. So very similar, obviously, like the sorceress as we know her, Teela's mom, you know, always had the bird type hat on. So it's sort of a way to like mix together that bird hat with the Teela tiara, and I think that is pretty cool. And that whole kind of mixing, blending between those two looks continues for the entire outfit because she still has that classic Teela color scheme with whites and golds, but it definitely looks much more regal in this new incarnation and also very shiny. All of this white is like a pearlized white. So I don't know if that's coming through too well on camera, but it's got this really beautiful pearlescent shine to it. And then the same with the gold. We've got like 2 tones of gold on there, where this lighter gold has kind of like this pearlescent shine to it as well. It's really nice looking. And then you can see the blue that is used in the wrist bracers and the boots. The boots have a very classic sorceress feel to them, with some gold on the trim, but you can see the top has the white feathers just like our classic sorceress. This is the only part on the figure where I have some sloppy paint, unfortunately, because I do have some gold brush strokes on the blue itself. And as a matter of fact, I actually just noticed on the neck, because of the glistening light, some of that pearlescent white is actually on the neck. So I might have to see if I can scrape that off. So I got a few sloppy spots on mine. For the most part, I think this looks really clean, and I do really like the bright, shiny colors on there. She does have a fabric cape, which you can see does have some pattern to it, where it's got like gold, and then, you know, like the way the frills at the bottom almost gives it like that feathery look. Different from our classic sorceress in the sense that it's not like a big wing cape that attaches to her hands. It's a very straight cape, but I do think that this functions well. It sits pretty nicely on there. It's definitely in line with the other capes we've had in this line. Some of them look better than others. This one looks all right. I like this one fine. And the articulation is what you have come to expect, I think, for Masterverse. That head is on a ball joint, but you can see the hair is a bit rigid, so that's going to hinder the movement just a little bit as it's going to bump into her shoulders there. The arms can go outwards, forwards, backwards, swivel at that bicep, double joint at the elbow for a good range of motion, swivel at the wrist, hinge joints at the wrist. We got the ball joint up there in the torso, which also allows her to turn left and right. Nothing in the waist here, as this is all connected, although it's probably articulated underneath the dress. Let me see if yeah, it is. So there is a waist turn that you can turn by like rotating the legs under the dress, though it is going to hinder that motion just a little bit. This is a pretty pliable piece of plastic for the dress there. The legs are obviously going to be hindered coming outwards, but you can swivel at the thighs. You got double joints at the knees, which are very tight on this figure, especially at the top of the knee there. Swivels at the boot cut, and then the ankles, of course, go forwards and backwards and rock side to side. So the dress is a bit restrictive. I think that is going to get in the way slightly of some of the poses that you're going to get out of your Teela figure here. Now, she does have a pair of interchangeable hands that I really like. So you can see right now, she's got 2 gripping hands, but she does also come with 2 open, what looks like almost like spell casting hands, right? And I like those quite a bit. So you could swap both of those out, or you can swap just one, because she also comes with the classic sorceress staff, which looks just like what we're used to the sorceress holding. It's just molded in a white plastic, so it doesn't have the same pearlescent shine as the dress. It's just a straight white plastic, but you can get her to hold that in either one of the gripping hands, which completes the look of this brand new Sorceress Tila. And let's go ahead and do comparison time. And for this, I just want to compare her with the other Masterverse Teela figures that we've got from the Revelations series. Because we got 2 from Revelation, one being her classic look, one being her kind of outcast outcast look when she left and ran away and cut her hair and did that whole thing. So it's kind of interesting to see an evolution of the character here in figure form. I do feel like this Sorceress one is probably the better in terms of sculpt, at least I think for the face and everything. I like this one the best, but pretty interesting looking at these lined up here. All right, now we are on to Skeletor, or as he is called in this form, Skeletech. Again, this is from the upcoming Revolution series, which comes out in January, though we did see him like this in some of the trailer footage already, some of the released images. And again, he's a big spoiler if you didn't watch Revelation, because at the end, when we found out that Motherboard was actually working for the Horde, and she infected Skeletor with this techno virus or whatever it is, essentially making him a pawn of the evil Horde, because Hordak and the Horde is coming. Really interesting concept here that plays into the Horde and their whole, their history with Skeletor and also their history with technology. So I'm curious to see where this goes. Obviously, it's quite the transformation for Skeletor, but I think as we can probably expect, it's not the way he's going to look for the entire series. So I'm interested to see what else we get with him, but I'm very curious to see what he looks like or what he does in this form. It's really cool head sculpt. I want to point out that there's some really nice textures in his hood there. You'll also notice lots of red, which is a clear indication of the Horde, because Skeletor does not typically wear red, but the Horde, that's kind of like their color. You can see the face, like he's very moody because only one of his eyes is showing. It's like having his moody hair hanging down in front of one of his eyes. But you can see even his face has got a little bit of that tech vibe going on there. And you can see like a pupil that looks like it's got a little bit of like that tech vibe going on. Really interesting stuff, but I think it's a really cool head sculpt on there. The body is insane because the middle of the torso looks like it's all robotic. He's got this robotic arm over here. His right arm obviously went through the biggest change because it's like it's merged with his Havoc staff, which is crazy looking. That's so bizarre. And then his legs, you can see, are also half robotic, where he's got these crazy looking robotic feet. Nice paint deco on here, where there's some metallics worked in with that kind of bluish metallic look. Really crazy stuff. Now, the articulation on here still functions the same as the others, though it's really weird on these feet. And I was trying to decide, like, are the knees supposed to bend backwards or do they bend normal? I'm not entirely sure, but you can see that the ankles, the way the feet are sculpted, like you could still swivel the feet, but obviously it's not in the typical ankle spot. It's a little forward there. And they still do hinge there as well. He stands fine. It just, I don't know, those legs feel so weird, but yeah, you can see I've got him flat-footed. He is standing up just fine on his own. The Havoc Staff type arm over here is really weird because it's bendy. This is all a bendy material. It's not like a really, like real flexible bendy material because it's actually pretty thick, but it does bend and flex around. And then you can swivel the Havoc Staff ram head hand, and also the jaw is articulated on that, so you can open and close the mouth on there. Really wild looking Skeletor. Now he also does come with one interchangeable hand for the left, so you can have this open kind of clawed fingered look, or if you want to pop that off, you can actually replace it with a closed fist, which is, man, this is just such an insane look for Skeletor. Not something we've really had before, but I kind of like it. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm very curious to see where this goes in the series. Aside from that interchangeable hand, he also comes with this little crown accessory, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's King Randor's crown, right? So that is really interesting stuff. And you can get him to hold it in his hand, or we can even get him to fit it over his head, which I like this. I kind of like the implication here, because this tells me that Skeletor isn't just going to stay a pawn of the Horde. Skeletor's gonna Skeletor, because let's face it, he's the real big bad. He's the star of the show. With that being said, here's another comparison time, because I definitely think he is the best looking Revolution version of Skeletor in the Masterverse line so far. I've talked about it before, but that Wave 1 Skeletor is certainly not my favorite of Skeletor figures at all. So this really does feel like quite an improvement, even though he's got a very drastically different look. All right, not gonna lie, now we're at my favorite part of this review video because I get to talk about the new Eternia figures, and we're gonna start with Manat Arms. So Manat Arms, not based on the Revolution cartoon series. This is part of the new Eternia subset, which if you are not familiar with that, new Eternia is Mattel's kind of like new versions of these classic characters where they're sort of doing their own thing with them, but they are all heavily inspired by some of the early concept artwork from before the characters were created in the vintage line. So there's always lots of cool interchangeable parts with these, which allows you to basically display these figures as a standard version of the character, but like a new version of them, or give them some of those embellishments that are have roots in that concept artwork. So Manat Arms here, one of the big differences with him with this helmet that's on him right now. You can see that that is shaped a little bit different than our typical Manat Arms helmet. That's because this is specifically inspired by the original Mark Taylor concept art, where Manat Arms sort of had this Spanish conquistador look, and the helmet was shaped much more like that. So that is what we've got going on here, though you can see Mattel still added the kind of tech elements in there that Manat Arms helmet is known for, which is incredibly cool. Now, what is so great about that is this Manat Arms does come with not only an interchangeable head, but the helmets are also interchangeable. So, you've got a mustached head and a non-mustached head. So if you prefer your Manat Arms to have a mustache like he did in Filmation, boom. If you prefer him not to have a mustache, like he appeared in the original toy line, we've got that too. But the helmets are swappable. And I think that's the first time we've really had that as a feature for a Manat Arms figure, which is really incredibly cool. So look at that. You can pop the helmet off, and you can see he just has like this green cap on underneath the helmet. And I gotta say, like, they did a really good job of making the helmet clip on there, fit nice and tight, and not look goofy. Like, it doesn't look oversized or goofy. It actually looks right. The proportions look good on his head. But like I said, if you don't want this more kind of slimmed down conquistador style helmet, you do have a more traditional Manat Arms helmet that we can pop on there as well. Look at that. So it's a little broader, a little rounder, and it has much more of that inspiration from the classic Manat Arms action figure or even his appearance in animation. Really cool stuff. And we can also just swap this entire head off by popping it off the ball joint. You can pop on the head without the mustache, which is also a really nice face sculpt, and we can use either one of those helmets for that. I love this feature. I think that is so incredibly cool. Now, aside from that, he's got his traditional orange armor, really nice paint deco on here on some of the sculpted bits. I do love the big shoulder armor over here, how it's got these crossed swords that are painted bronze. That is a new little feature, a new design element for Manat Arms. And you can see he does still have the whole arm armor that comes down. And the way they did it is really unique. You can see there's like a little peg there that's connecting the lower portion to the top portion of the armor, which is really interesting. And the articulation still functions over there on his arm, slightly hindered, but not too bad there. The back of the armor actually has a space where you can store his mace weapon, which is very, very cool. And the rest of the figure just looks really nice too. I love the flat green of the bodysuit. I actually really like the style of the loincloth that he's wearing there. All of this looks really, really nice. I think this is a solid Manat Arms action figure. I like that he stands out from what we've had before, but he is easily the best Manat Arms in Masterverse so far. And the other ones were based on Revelation. And honestly, the deluxe one was pretty great on its own, but this right here is the standout to me. Now, he does have swappable hands, so you've got gripping hands you could use for both. You've got closed fists that you can use for both. I also showed you he does come with his traditional mace, which you can see has actually got like a two-tone paint deco, which is very nice. But one new thing that they added to this is you've got this extra attachment on here. So if you want, you can actually pop the top off of the mace, and you can add on this part where it turns into this like ball and chain weapon. And I thought that was really cool. And you can see the way they designed it, where the top of the mace actually looks like the ball, and like it looks like it just extends out. I think that is so creative, especially for a character like Manat Arms, who is like a mechanic and he builds stuff. Really cool stuff. All right, guys, it's comparison time. So I do want to show them with those other Masterverse versions of Man at Arms that I showed you, or that I talked about a little earlier on, just so you can see what this new version looks like standing next to those. But another comparison I'd like to make is with the Masters of the Universe Classics version of Man at Arms, which was one of my favorite figures in that entire line. Still think that that is a solid figure. But it's really interesting looking at it next to this new Masterverse one, because I think both of these are excellent figures, but they're both great in their own ways. And the final figure we're going to talk about from this particular wave is new Eternia Trapjaw. Man, guys, this Trapjaw, I mean, look at this thing. This design is fantastic. I mean, you look at this, and we have got ourselves a really nice, very classic looking Trapjaw, just kind of souped up with modern articulation and sculpt and design. I love the look of this guy. I love the colors. He's so vibrant. I love the two tones in the metal colors there, where you got like this gunmetal that's for his robotic arm. You've got like this kind of bluish metallic color that's working down the other arm and the harness. You can see there's two-tone green where it's got like this dry brushing on there that gives it this metallic, almost like it's scuffed up and worn. You can see the same metallics on the legs. This is a beautiful looking figure. It's one of my favorites in the new Eternia segment. I just think he looks awesome. And that head sculpt is really, really nice. And watch this. He does have an articulated jaw, which you can see he's got kind of the gross, dangly, hanging nastiness in there. Oh, from his jaw missing. How awesome is that? And they even left the ring on his head. So he's got the cool little zipline action feature of the vintage toy. Pretty fun stuff. Now you'll see that they designed him very similar to that vintage figure as well, because his belt does have a space to hang his alternate arm attachments. So he's got the cannon, the hook, and the claw. I do like that they moved these slightly more to the back of his belt, so they're not just hanging directly off the sides of his waist, getting in the way of his arm movements. But they also gave him this short sword here, which he can holster on his back, which has got a really cool ram skull design to it. And he can put that in his gripping hand so he can do some sword fighting there as well. I think that is just really cool. The robotic arm is awesome. It's oversized. It's big. Kind of gives me that 2000X vibe because of how big and oversized it is, where it looks like it's got all these pistons and giant screws in it. You can see the way it articulates there. It's actually got a ball joint up here at the shoulder. So look at that. You can move it in and out, forwards and backwards, and then you've got a standard elbow joint there, but you can also swivel. Look at that. It rocks side to side. And then, of course, where the attachment actually attaches, you can swivel that like a wrist attachment. The blaster looks very similar to the vintage, but it's got some nice extra paintwork on there. Very easy to pop that out, like rah, boom, just like that. It just pops right out of socket. And then if we want to pop the claw on instead, you've got that as an attachment. Or, of course, we'll get rid of the hook, and we've got the claw. And the claw's got a little bit of a different look to it. You can see the way it's sized there, and it's got an articulation point on there. But wait, we aren't even done. Because I mentioned this is a very classic looking Trapjaw. Like when you look at this, he just looks like a souped up version of the figure that you remember in the original line. But New Eternia likes to inject these elements from the concept art. So how do we do that with Trapjaw? Well, if we look at the claw attachment here, let's pop this off of his arm real quick. You can see that this larger piece of the claw, this top portion here, you can actually remove the bottom claw from it. And this is now a new jaw for Trap Jaw. So we can easily just pop the other jaw off. It's just attached right here on the sides of his head. Gotta kind of get your fingernails on there. Look at his head right now. Ugh, gross. But now we can use this other jaw instead. We can attach it in place. And this gives him a bigger, more oversized silver jaw, which also has these larger like ear type pieces, which come straight out of some of the early concept artwork for Trap Jaw and just gives him a different look overall. I think this is really cool. I will say it feels a little bit looser and it doesn't line up with the top, his actual face as well as the red one, but I think that's actually by design. I think it's supposed to look like a big old underbite. And it's a really cool look for the character. So we've got some mixing and matching options if you'd rather have a big silver jaw or the slimmed down pinkish jaw. It's really, really cool. All right, guys. It's comparison time. For the final time in this video, I want to start by showing them off against the Revelation version of Trapjaw, because it's the other Masterverse Trapjaw, which I also thought was a pretty cool figure. Came with a lot of different accessories, obviously, but this new one here, the new Eternia one, definitely has much more of a classic feel to it that I think a lot of fans are really going to like. And let's do the same thing with him. Let's stand him alongside the Masters of the Universe Classics Trapjaw, which was another great figure in that line. But it's really interesting to look at these two side by side. Specifically, the proportions seem very different with these two figures. But once again, I'm going to say I think they're both great figures in their own ways. So there you go, my friends. There is a look at the newest wave of Masterverse figures, giving us 2 figures from Revolution and 2 figures from New Eternia. Honestly, I have really been enjoying Masterverse these past several waves. It really feels like Mattel has kicked things into gear and has turned this into a legitimately great line of Masters of the Universe action figures. New Eternia continues to be my personal favorite segment, and I love that we've built out such a great collection of those so far, and I can't wait to get even more of those in my collection. I think they are so fun. So this new wave is starting to ship right now. I ordered mine through BigBadToyStore.com, but I do believe these will also be hitting retail store shelves. So happy hunting, my friends, and until next time.